everybody. Welcome to the third Peat-Fest South-West broadcast. This is the final one of a series of 3, obvious, I suppose, saying that. But the first one was about wild connections, was about linking young people and how they engage with the outdoors. The second was more about the stories we tell and the cultural influence to how we view peatlands, how we connect with them and how we might manage them in the future. And this one is concentrating on our future management of peatlands and the role they play with climate change. So we're really looking forward to it. We've got a great team of people presenting to you this morning. Before I introduce the speakers, though, there's just a little bit of information about how we're going to manage, because we take these broadcasts in a relaxed way. We want everyone to join in and use the chat. So please introduce yourselves if you want to, and share information with each other if you want to ask questions as we go. At the end of the presentations, we will share those questions and allow people to talk to the presenters. Kat, is there anything else that I should have said then in terms of how we're going to do it? Oh, we're recording it, aren't we?
Yes, thank you, Naomi. So we're recording today. Please keep your microphones off when the presenters are speaking, so just so the audio is clear for everyone. We'll share a recording and a transcript at the end for anyone that would like it. And yeah, I've just said welcome in the chat, so please say hi, introduce yourself if you'd like to.
Thanks, Kat. So first of all, I'll just introduce myself and my colleague Kat. We are part of the Art and Energy Collective, and we are coordinating a peat festival across the Southwest region. We've been doing that throughout the summer with a fantastic wide range of partners and deliverers and peat lovers. So today the presenters are examples of those people. So yes, we're here, and I just want to introduce the speakers that we have got for you. We have Steve Mewes from the Somerset Wildlife Trust, who will be talking to you about the relationship between climate change and how peatlands are managed for the long-term future. Then we have the IUCN Peatland Programme, Garance Wood-Moulin speaking, and she is unfortunately not able to be here live, but she has sent a presentation over about the Peatland Code, what it is and how that can be used for the greater good of the planet, as it were, and especially the UK. Then we've got RE-PEAT, Cisca Devereux, who is in, where did you say, in Nigeria, Cisca?
I'm tuning in from Nairobi, Kenya.
Nairobi, yeah. So Cisca is speaking on behalf of RE-PEAT, who are key partners in the delivery of this peat festival, reaching youngsters and being European-wide, bringing a different view sometimes of peatland justice. So she'll be talking later. And then we have Louise Treneman and Grace Hervé, who are working on the Somerset Peatlands, Avalon Marshes, and the Dorset Peatland Partnership and Dorset Heaths. So those are coming to present together about the way they're managing the peatlands for the long-term future. And then finally, there's Jenny Ayrton, who's another art and energy colleague, who's going to be looking at the small-scale community engagement in the environment and in the looking at creative climate action. So hopefully we've got a wonderful array of talks for you. Just last week, leaders from across the world were meeting for COP30 in Brazil, and they have been trying to make some progress in relation to the way our land and seas are managed for climate and providing a healthy environment for communities, either reducing carbon or ending the use of fossil fuels. I think many of us have heard plenty of news to say that that wasn't the most successful COP30 or COP, but it may arise in the presentations, and particularly the way we're going to manage things locally and on the ground for climate change and resilience and adaptation to change in the future. So I will introduce, I think, Steve first then as our first speaker, who's going to be looking at that advocacy and adaptation to climate change, among other things. So I'll hand over to Steve and welcome you, Steve.
Great, thanks, Naomi. I've just noticed that for some reason the share button has been grayed out. It looks like I've not got permissions to share my presentation at the moment. Don't know if Kat can change the settings. We did test this all out beforehand, everybody, but there we go. Fantastic. Great, thank you. So let's just get this here. Brilliant. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. So yes, welcome everybody, and thanks very much for the invite today to talk about some of our peat work in Somerset. Big shout out straight off to Sian Russell, who doesn't work on a Fridays, so she would normally be giving his talk, so hopefully I can fill her shoes a little bit. Lou later on will be talking about some of the detail about on the ground restoration we do here in Somerset, but I'm going to give you a bit of an overview. So I work, as Naomi said, I work for Somerset Wildlife Trust. I'm the local nature partnership coordinator and advocacy manager. So it means I get involved in all sort of climate and nature, big climate and nature related programs going on in the county. So today I'm going to give a bit of an overview of what we've been up to, an outline of our restoration, but also talking about some of the challenges as well that we face to get more restoration done. So let's rapidly go on to the next slide. So before I go into the peat, I just thought I'd mention this event that was yesterday that some of you may have noticed. National Emergency Briefing, the first of its kind, was launched in London by a team of about 9 or 10 really top experts. It was led by Chris Packham, gave the introduction, and Mike Berners-Lee was chairing the whole event. And a really high-profile event to try to move action in the UK on the climate and the nature emergency we face. So just a bit of information there. Feel free to Google it. When I stop speaking, I'll chuck a few more things in the chat so people can have a look. You can actually see a recording of the whole presentation, which does go on for about 2.5 hours, but it's well worth it. It covers everything from food and nature and society and national defence and everything. It's really, really important briefing. So there'll be a little sort of a more succinct video that'll be touring around the UK later on and into next year. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. The article there on the left is from The Guardian, who were there yesterday, and quite a few other major media people. So recognising the value of peat, as you'll all know, probably from previous presentations and the other workshops that you guys have done, it's in the policy discussion at government much more than it was definitely about sort of 5-6 years ago. So that's really, really encouraging. This is the environment plan that was produced a while back. It's a big mention in there. It's a big part of England Peat Action Plan, and the latest Climate Change Committee's report on reducing emissions. It gets something like 47 mentions in this report, which is really encouraging. The UK government has recognised how vital peat is and how vital peat restoration is to the climate story. So that's all good. That's all the good news. Bit of an overview of peat in Somerset. So a little map of Somerset here. We've set up a thing called Somerset Peatland Partnership, and this covers peatland in Somerset, but also North Somerset, so sort of Weston-super-Mare and north of the Mendips. Our focus of the talk today is going to be about lowland peat. There's the South-West Peatland Partnership that does the work on Exmoor that comes into Somerset, but most of the work on restoration we've been doing is on the lowland peat, which is the red splodges in the middle of the map there on the levels and moors, where the peat is incredibly important. So just a bit of a more background. So how much carbon do Somerset lowland peatlands emit? When we think about lowland peat in Somerset, it's about trying to reduce emissions rather than sequestration. So that's a really key aspect to keep in mind. The emissions are very, very large from peat when it dries out. And so we're focused on trying to bring the water table to a more sort of natural state, so that the peat can stay safe and the emissions can stay safely in the ground. So best estimate, and these are estimates, we've got quite a bit of data on peat emissions from our peat in Somerset, but these are scaled up to try to give us an estimate for how much per year peatland does emit, and of course it varies per year depending on how wet or dry the year has been. So from drained peat, so the peat that's drained for use as farmland, we estimate something like 240,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per year. From peat is still extracted in Somerset. We're the last county in England that still extracts peat commercially, and not a great record, and something we campaign with the government a lot to try to change that and to cancel that. We have to stop this extraction of peat in Somerset. It is crazy. It's basically another form of fossil fuel, and we cannot afford to dig it out and just spread it on our garden so that it can dry out and emit. So the extracted peat, we estimate about 15,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per year. And what does that mean in reality? Well, Somerset's total emissions, so the whole of Somerset's total emissions are about 3,200,000. So by my rough maths, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that works out to about 8% of the whole of Somerset's total emissions. So from everything in Somerset, from people driving cars around, from how we heat our homes, to how businesses use carbon in heating their offices and so on, all of that is about 3.2 million tonnes, and peatland is about 8% of that, from just that one thing. It's a big proportion of our emissions in Somerset, and so we're trying to turn that around. So what is peatland restoration? It seems strange that I need to ask that question, but the definitions has only really recently been defined. If you asked that question 10 years ago, we never really done peatland restoration in Somerset before about 4 or 5 years ago. And when a peat extraction, after a peat extractor had finished with an area of land, taken all the peat out, they would say they'd restored it when they lined it with clay and filled it with water, and it was then good for wintering wildlife and so on, for ducks and things. But unfortunately, that's not how we would define restoration. To us, it's basically trying to return damaged peatlands to a stable state where they can function naturally and support specialist peatland species like sort of sundews and sphagnum mosses and so forth. So, but it's still a tricky definition, because you can't, once you've restored peatland, it's still, and Lou will come on to this later on, there's a lot of monitoring and maintenance and keeping an eye on it, and monitoring the water levels to make sure that it stays in good condition. It's not a natural environment down here in the levels and moors. It's very managed. So for 2,000 years, we've been managing the wetlands down here since the Romans. So it's, when you think about the levels and moors here in Somerset, think about it as a very managed wetland that we're trying to help the carbon. So peatlands are a type of wetland. The ideal water table is 10 to 20 centimetres below ground for maintaining good condition of peat. Trench bunding is one of the restoration techniques that Lou will talk about later on. And again, first time we tried it 3 years ago. So we're learning all the time about how to restore peat in Somerset. and typical restoration trajectory. So, you know, when you're restoring peat, we have to think at least 50 years ahead about how you can monitor it, how you can maintain it, so that you can actually plan and eventually, after decades, ideally, hopefully, moving towards actually building up some peat forming habitat. But that takes a long time. It's not a quick process. But what is quick is actually reducing the carbon emissions when you re-wet it. So that's the beauty of bringing the water table up and making the peat a lot wetter. You can reduce emissions very, very quickly, much quicker than planting trees. So that's the beauty and one of the magic of peat. So there's just a list of some of the restoration sites that we've done in Somerset. We've done about 350 hectares so far. We haven't done any private land, so this is all environmental NGOs, people like ourselves, Somerset Wildlife Trust, or RSPB, or Natural England. That's what NE stands for there. That's the different areas that we've done. So how far have we got to in Somerset with restoring peat? Stark image, we've done 1%. Yay! Which doesn't sound that much, but I'd say 4 years ago it would have been 0%. So, you know, we've started. We know a lot more about how to do it, and so that's, you know, we've just got to crack on now and work out how to restore the rest of it. We like a challenge in this world. So securing funding, this is one of the main challenges, obviously, for most of our work. So we're currently funded by a DEFRA Nature for Capital Peatland Grant Scheme, which funds capital works, but not in the long-term management. And hopefully we'll get an extra year's funding there. There's a big landscape recovery project. Landscape recovery is a incentive scheme from the government to help landowners to restore land all around the country. And there's a big project called Greater Sedgemoor, which is producing all its reports and so forth for DEFRA over the next few weeks. And so fingers crossed that gets to go ahead to the next stage next year. The important thing there, I've got pipeline development, a fancy title for basically having we need to produce a list of the next bits of land that we can restore. So that work still needs to be done. Some of the promotion that we've done, peatland restoration, we've done lots of sort of videos and blogs and all the rest of it. Really, because it's such a new thing in Somerset, it's really explaining to people what's going on and why we're doing it and why it's so important. Big win last weekend, we were on Country File, which was quite cool. So if you look up Country File's episode from last Sunday, you'll see Sian there and a few other colleagues talking about replanting sphagnum on our restored peatland, which is brilliant. Some of our challenges, long-term funding, you might hear me say that again. We've got various ideas and different funding applications in to try to keep this going, but that is a challenge. As I've mentioned there, the adapting levels was a previous landscape recovery project which wasn't successful in a different part of the levels and moors. And let's say we're hoping that the Greater Sedgemoor work goes ahead next year. And again, some of the main challenges and barriers: water availability. You wouldn't believe it when you have wet periods, but we're getting, with climate change, getting much more spiky weather patterns. We're getting much more storm events. We're getting wetter winters. We're getting drier summers. And so water availability is a big challenge, and that's something that worries us a lot about how we can maintain the right level of water in the water table to keep the peat wet in a climate emergency. Government priorities, so things like ending peat extraction. So it's still, people are still legally allowed to extract peat when they have the right licenses, and we're campaigning with the government to stop that. And there's legislation in Parliament at the moment from one of our local MPs, Sarah Dyke, but it won't progress because it hasn't government support. So we're pushing the government on that one. And then long-term funding and planning, as I've mentioned, mosaic of land ownership. That basically means that a lot of people own different little pockets of land in the levels and moors, and it makes it very complicated trying to get restoration done at scale. We try to work at a larger landscape level here in Somerset, like most of the country now. That's the best method to try to get big things done at scale, but that's trickier when you have lots of different landowners. And then communicating all the findings around to everybody, to making sure everyone knows how important peatlands are. Pelodoculture, little jargony word there, that's farming on peatlands. So growing things like typha, which is bulrush, and trying to find markets for things that are quite new. So that's quite an exciting thing that we could talk about at another time. So anyway, yeah, that's it for me. Look forward to hearing any questions later on. Back to you, Naomi.
Thanks, Steve. Really, really interesting. I hadn't realised there's 99% more to do, which is a big challenge, and also it's made me remember that the length of time peatland takes to sequester carbon from, you know, the initial setup, the initial sphagnum planting or wetland raising to sequestering enough to count the carbon is longer than the reduction in emissions, if you see what I mean.
Yes, that process does take a while. The beauty is, though, as I say, you can reduce those emissions quite quickly.
Yeah.
So if you've got a heavily drained field, maybe the water table's down to a metre or more below the soil level, that will be emitting in an average year approximately 30 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year, which is a heck of a lot. If you bring your water table back up to 10 to 20 centimetres below, you can bring that down to approximately 10 tonnes. So you can bring that down by 60% really quickly, within months, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Just by getting that peat wet again. So that's the message, which is really good news. Yeah, as you say, to move to actually sequestering takes a lot longer, but we're working on it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the outline of the work going on in Somerset. And we found that when we've been doing this peat festival, very few people around understand the variety of different types of peatlands across the region, from Cornwall to the Dorset Mires. So it's been brilliant that we've had this Heritage Lottery funding to enable the sharing and the connecting and the celebrating what we've got in the region. So let's move on then. Thanks, Steve. We are going to move to IUCN Peatland Programme. Garance is going to speak online. We're going to share her presentation. She couldn't make it today, but she's done something for us about the Peatland Code. And I'm looking forward to this because I'm still not sure that I understand it. Jenny is going to try and upload it now, and we'll go from there. I'll turn myself off.
Hello everyone, my name is Garance Wood-Moulin and I am the Peatland Code Development Lead at the IUCN Peatland Programme. It's my absolute pleasure today to give you a brief introduction into the Peatland Code and the important role that peatlands play in the fight against climate change. So firstly, a little background around peatlands. On the left here, you can see that a healthy peatland is a net carbon store. So that means it's fixing CO2 from the atmosphere. And in the UK, around 3.2 billion tonnes of CO2 is stored in our peatlands. But that appreciation and the understanding of the value that peatlands have is relatively new. And unfortunately, as a consequence of the way that peatlands have been managed historically, a lot of them have meant that they're in a damaged or degraded state, with an estimated 80% of our UK peatlands in some way degraded. And as you can see on the right, that erosion has meant that it is a huge emitter of CO2. So that 80% equates to around 20 million tonnes of CO2 being emitted each year, which is 4% of our total UK emissions. So as you can see, peatlands hold the key to being able to meet our net zero targets, and we also really need to protect these peatlands and to stop them from further losses. Now, of course, the scale of the task is not going to be able to be achieved with public finance alone, which is where private finance can come and, with a blended approach, can be a way forward for being able to start tackling the problem. And so the IUCN Peatland Programme was founded in 2009, and really it was a way of being able to build that consensus and community for peatlands, with a core value listed on the screen there, to facilitate this ambitious need through strong science, policy, and also partnerships. But of course, the other core function is to support the hosting and running of the Peatland Code. And so the Peatland Code is something that came around in 2012 because the scale of the funding gap, as illustrated on the screen, is huge. And a lot of these figures are quite debatable. But the 80% that's degraded, that's around 3 million hectares, with a majority of it being in Scotland. But of course, we have some lowlands and scattered in Wales and Northern Ireland. So it's a UK-wide issue and problem that needs addressing. And so this leads me on to explaining a little bit about what is the Peatland Code. So first of all, the Peatland Code is the domestic voluntary carbon market standard that was launched in 2015. And it plays a pivotal role by allowing independently verified carbon credits from peatland restoration to be used in a company's offset. But it is also a way of the UK meeting its national greenhouse gas targets. And through that blended private and public finance, re-wetting projects can happen, and the sale of carbon credits can really help unlock that peatland restoration. Of course, we're not just looking at peatlands, we're now also looking at biodiversity, and that's the beauty of peatlands, is they don't just benefit carbon, it's also a fantastic solution that helps people and biodiversity, and with wider benefits, which I'll go into in a bit more detail later on. So what makes the Peatland Code so unique is that we have a monitoring, reporting and verification framework which is science-backed. So all of our emission factors for the different peatland condition categories are aligned with the UK greenhouse gas inventory and have been developed through robust science and have gone through a lot of rounds of reporting and scientific studies. So that's one of the key bases backing the code, is that science. The second on the screen there that you can see is that independence governance. So we have a executive board which makes the final decisions on the Peatland Code and how it functions, but it is also supported by a technically advisory board that will feed in that part of the science part of it, with working groups and investment forums to help keep the code functioning as current as possible and keeping up with market trends. The other element is ensuring that there is a permanence element to the code. So with all of the projects, there is a contribution to a risk buffer to help with unavoidable reversals. So that might be things from wildfires or peat slides, or events that are unavoidable or unforeseen. There's a 15% and a 20% contribution. It was 15 and it's now moving in line with requirements from an international certification standard, ICBCM, which is requiring 20% of projects. So that's to help with that longevity. We have an element also of additionality. So it has to pass the legal and a financial test. And that is a key to ensure that the project is going above and beyond the business as usual scenario. So that keeps that element high integrity. And the last two is that we have all of our all of our templates and everything transparently visible on our website, but also on a public facing registry where you can look up any project and have an understanding of what's going on in that project, what are their emission reductions for the whole project length, and it's a way of being able to track everything transparently. And all of the projects are validated and verified independently by independent bodies that are ISO certified. So all of that combined really underpins the codes and makes it a robust framework to be able to deliver peatland restoration in the UK. And for us, we've really seen a huge strength of growth in the Peatland Code over the last couple of years. We had 100 projects last year registering. We've now almost, coming towards 400 projects across England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and of course, majority in Scotland. There has been a little bit, fewer projects this year registering, but that's only due to shifts in funding windows and funding changes. However, we are seeing that even though there may be fewer projects being registered, the size of the projects are still increasing. So it might be that we're having fewer projects, but larger areas being registered under the code. And all of those projects being registered is around estimated sort of 11 million tonnes of CO2 emission reductions over the lifetime of the projects. So that's already quite a huge achievement, but we have still a long way to go and are still working hard to ensure that more peatland restoration can be entered in the code to ensure that we can start helping meet some of those targets that are set on a UK-wide level. So just to summarise, when a peatland credit is issued, we have two types of credit. We have what is called a pending issuance unit, which is a promise to deliver credit. That can be usually given once the restoration has taken place, and that can help fund the restoration work. But we then have, once a project reaches the year 5 verification, we then have a Peatland Code unit, and that is for that vintage, for that year 5, that is the emission reductions that have taken place, and those can be used to offset against emissions and can be made claims using those credits. We have had our first 2 verifications this year, so it's really exciting, and we're having more projects coming underway and being verified in the coming months, so a lot more peatland carbon units will become available. But the carbon credits in the Peatland Code don't just look at carbon, it has wider benefits as well. And so when projects are investing in the Peatland Code and using it, it's bundled with additional benefits, such as improving water quality. So around 70% of the UK's water is sourced from catchments dominated by peatland habitats. And that is a huge benefit for water treatment plants because they don't have to invest as much to reduce their, to treat the water. And the other huge benefit is it supports biodiversity. And so one of the future areas that the code is looking at is quantifying that biodiversity. But even as it is, peatlands are a hotspot for wild plants like sundews, cotton grass, marsh fritillary butterflies, and of course you've got the golden plover, which is a fantastic, beautiful bird, and they are native to peatlands. So there are incredible resource, and it's incredibly important in a UK perspective in order for us to meet our net zero national targets. And really the fight against climate change, we need that restoration. And it is a huge, like I mentioned at the start, a huge net store for the UK. And so the Peatland Code is one way that we can start addressing the scale of the restoration, the peatland restoration that's needed in the UK. If you would like to find out more about the work we do, please do get in touch. I do apologise I couldn't be there online with you today, but I have put my contact details on the screen there, and hopefully this gives you a brief overview of the role that the Peatland Code plays in unlocking that private finance. But please do get in touch. My email address is there. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions should you have any. Thank you very much for your time today. I do hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Grace Online, and thanks. That was a really interesting presentation. There's been one or two comments about how the verification is done. Louise is just answering that, some of that. So it's a new, well, it's been going for 10 years, but it's such a massive task to improve the millions of hectares of peatlands that it's interesting to learn from them and find out how the process actually works. So thanks, Grace, Garance, and we will move on. I'm enjoying the conversations that are going on in the chat, so keep them coming, but we'll move on now to RE-PEAT, Cisca Devereux in Nairobi, and we will hear how you as an organisation have been getting involved in the future management of peat and peatland justice for all, how peatlands weave into the society. So I'll hand over to you, Cisca. Thank you for agreeing to do the presentation or the talk.
Thank you very much, Naomi. And yeah, hello everybody. Very happy to be here today. My name is Cisca Devereux. I'm from Ireland, a neighbouring country of, I think, most people here, and a country with plenty of bogs and peatlands. Ireland is over 1/5 peatlands. I'm from Dublin, so I didn't grow up around the bogs. Actually, my experience was that anyone outside of Dublin we called boggers. But now I can happily say I am also a bogger. I'm a volunteer with RE-PEAT and the Peatland Justice Campaign. For those who don't know RE-PEAT, it's a youth-led collective focused on changing hearts and minds for and through peatlands. And our vision is an interconnected world where all peatland creatures and the communities are supported culturally and ecologically. Beyond that, I'm also the European representative for youth engaged in wetlands. As you know, peatlands are a very precious type of wetland. And so we work to support the youth voice in the inclusion of the Convention on Wetlands, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. But today I'm tuning in from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a consultant with the Global Peatlands Initiative with the UN Environment Programme. And I think a lot of what I'm going to share today is a bit shaped more on this global perspective. So I think it was really great. Now we had the two presentations focused on the UK, and I hope today I can share a bit on the zoom out, especially what happened just in the last weeks in COP30, where peatlands were involved in that. But then also connecting how organizations like RE-PEAT, how we all play a different part in connecting local actions to this global resonance as well. So peatlands on a global scale. So I think everybody here really knows peatlands matter. They matter especially for climate action, and their conservation, restoration, and the sustainable management are extremely powerful nature-based solutions to tackle the triple planetary crisis. So climate, biodiversity, and pollution. So we know peatlands will either be part of the problem, they are part of the problem, or a key element of climate solutions. In the Global Peatlands Assessment, which was a huge state-of-the-art study of peatlands carried out in 2022, with over 226 peatland experts involved, we found that despite only covering 3 to 4% of the planet's land surface, peatlands contain up to 1/3 of the world's soil carbon. But unfortunately, it also revealed that the Earth loses 500,000 hectares of peatlands a year. and that 50 million hectares of peatlands are already drained and degraded, contributing, which is around 4% of annual greenhouse gas emissions, which it's a bit hard to put into scale, but this is more emissions than all of shipping and aviation combined, which is huge. So protecting these intact peatlands and restoring degraded ones are absolutely essential and a very cost-effective and high-impact strategy for climate action. So with that context, we know that they should be high on the agenda at COPs. So what happened this month, it was the UNFCCC COP, so the climate change COP, which is the conference of the parties to this convention, which is an agreement signed by governments and parties to protect our climate. This is the annual conference, so this being COP30, so this was the 30th year, where these governments, parties meet to discuss and negotiate on climate. And this year it was in Belém. I'm not sure if people saw in the news all the chaos as well. There was fires. There was these incredible protests from indigenous peoples, as well as very expensive hotels. I know it was a very small COP because of these issues as well. But we can see that, yeah, keeping peat carbon in the ground is absolutely crucial if we then want to meet the main target of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, which is meeting the 2-degree target by 2030, and also to really keep at this stage, the worst effects of climate change at bay. So for peatlands at COP, yeah, on our radar, and I was hoping maybe we would even hear of some more today, there was 11 events for peatlands at COP30. And these are a lot of them led by governments. Some of the biggest impacts we saw, or the biggest momentum at COP, was led by Indonesia. We saw tremendous reaffirmations for commitments by Indonesia with countries. Indonesia is a big leader in peatlands, but particularly in South-South cooperation. And South-South cooperation is this manifestation of solidarity between developing countries. So they're working together with the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Republic of Congo, Peru, with Indonesia itself, to work together on international tropical peatlands. So they have the International Tropical Peatland Center. And here at the COP this year, we saw huge reaffirmations where they came together to bring forward these commitments, as well as taking in new commitments with private industry, as well as academia. So they're really showing how a whole society approach is on the rise as well. So the other big news for peatlands at COP30 this year was the Peatland Breakthrough. So the Peatland Breakthrough, it's this global call to action, and it's a real step on the accelerator towards 2030. So what the Peatland Breakthrough does, specifically, it looks at how within our global Paris climate change goals, what do we need to do for peatlands in order to keep to this 2 degrees? So they launched the science-based framework. So this is really, it gives very, very specific targets on how many hectares of peatlands we need to restore globally, how much degradation we need to halt, and how much money we need to raise by 2030 if we realistically want to achieve our goals. Of course, these goals are immense. So it was a big challenge also looking really what the science says and versus what would actually be feasible, which is the next step. They have launched also an endorsement process. I will share this in the chat for anybody here who would also be interested in joining the Peatland Breakthrough, as the next step will really be about mobilizing around these targets, mobilizing action and investments into achieving this by 2030. It was also announced that Germany would join Peru and Uganda as champion countries. As you know, Germany is a country with over 90% of their peatlands destroyed. So they do tremendous work as well on a global scale and within Germany to invest in peatlands, as they do see this as one of the key climate strategy. So yeah, we could really see that the importance of peatlands were really featured. There was also events in the Asian pavilion, the Ukrainian pavilion, where they look at peatlands as a military defense mechanism. There was events in the East African community, the German, and as well the food roots pavilion, showing how this momentum is really accelerating not only across regions but also across sectors. So so now what's next, moving forward from COP30 as well. So we can see also that really to have this to have change and to have impact, we really need to also work together, especially on this global scale. If we really want to work at the scale and the speed that we need for peatlands, we really need global action. And to have global action, we also need partnerships. So that's one thing we do under the Global Peatlands Initiative. What RE-PEAT is one of our key members as representing youth. And one thing that now we're really working on is the Venice Agreement. Because sometimes, especially from RE-PEATs, when I think of our perspectives from there, it could be, you can feel very far away from these COPs and feel very far away from like, where is our role? What do we do? How do we influence it? But actually there is very strong links, and all of this is connected. And one way that we really do try to connect this within the peatlands world is through the Venice Agreement. So this is a poetically binding agreement. You sign up through vows, and you sign up to protect your peatlands and to be part of this community. And this Venice Agreement is really a living, breathing community tool for peatland conservation. It was first signed in 2022, and it was co-created by artists, scientists, indigenous leaders, policymakers, and land stewards. And it weaves together this diverse knowledge and experience that really connects local action to this global resonance. So it started in Venice, it then moved to Portugal, and this year it's going to be in Kenya. And what I would like to finish on is to invite everybody here to the next meeting for the Venice Agreement, because it's really a great way to really connect from this local and national level to the global level. And next week there's an online gathering on the 2nd of December. I think it's 1 p.m. UK time. And what they really want to discuss in this meeting is how we shift this center of gravity away from just top-down mandates, but towards a bottom-up, place-based ecology of care. And they really want to, in this meeting, discuss how we do this. How do we connect local action to global? And I think a lot of the learnings today and what's discussed today would be fantastic to see what people take out of this meeting and bring it there into a wide world, with the Peatland Guardians worldwide. So yeah, I will post a link for that in the chat. So I really invite everybody to connect there. And yeah, I hope today I could share a bit on what happened at COP30. It's still all very fresh, what was happening, but that was the latest. So with that, I'll say, yeah, togo boge. That's an Irish phrase. It means take it easy or take it soft. Bulg comes from the Irish word, bulg comes from the Irish word bulg. So you say togo boge, take it easy, take it softly, take it by the bogs. So thank you very much, and I hand back over to Naomi. Thank you.
Thank you, Cisca. That was brilliant. I am sure we all loved hearing about the peatland activity taking part in COP and that relationship between the ecology of place and the worldwide efforts to work together to improve the peatlands for everybody, all living things. So thank you. Please put the information that you're talking about in the chat. That would be fantastic. And Art and Energy just had an exhibition, How to Bury the Giant, in Plymouth, and we had a big screen up there with people describing projects and efforts at COP30, screening that at the same time as giving people experience of something very local and small, you know, the mosses, the peat, the craft, the creativity around that, and totally get totally get the big scale and the small scale having to join up in some way. So great, thank you very much. Now we're going back to that ecology of place. We're going to Dorset and Somerset, where we've got some fantastic work going on to repair and restore areas of peatland in those two counties. Very different types of peatland, but anyway, I'll leave you to hear both Louise Treneman and Grace Hervé about that, talking about their work in the management and restoration of those areas. So I'm going to turn myself off and hand you over. Thanks.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm going to be having a chat this afternoon with Louise Treneman. So Louise.
Hi everyone. Oh, Grace, I think you've frozen.
Sorry. Can you not hear?
You're back.
Oh, hi. So just saying hi, everyone. My name is Grace Hervé. I'm the Dorset Peat Partnership Project Manager. And this afternoon, myself and Louise are going to have a little chat about our sort of sites we've been delivering across our partnerships. So hi, Louise. Nice to see you. And tell us about this image here on the screen and how what does this show exactly?
Yes, so I'll just quickly introduce myself as well. So I'm Louise Treneman. I work for Natural England. I've got various different hats, but the hat I'm putting on today is I was tasked with delivering a peat restoration project at Shapwick Heath, which is part of the Somerset Wetlands National Nature Reserve. So as Steve mentioned earlier, this was sort of the first time we'd really looked at peat restoration at scale in Somerset. So yes, these photos are what the site looked like when I got to it. So this it's been a National Nature Reserve for a long time. It was bought in the 90s, and it's an ex-peat extraction site. So there's a lot of peat voids, which are now lakes or reed beds, but there's some areas that weren't fully extracted, which is where the deepest peat still remains. So these photos here just show the sort of the state of the remaining peatlands beforehand. So you can see a lot of scrub, a lot of bog myrtle, a kind of little shrubby plant dominating throughout a lot of the sward, lots of trees coming in, lots of birch trees, which is always a sign that the peatlands are drying out if birch trees can come in. So yeah,
Okay.
that's what's here.
Yeah, so obviously this is how the habitat looked before restoration work. So let's just move on to see how you've changed it. Wow, that's quite dramatic. So
yeah,
how have you transformed the dry thing to the area now we see in September 24? What's happened here?
So this is a project that was funded by Nature for Climate Peatland Grant Scheme, which is the sort of government grant scheme that's funding a lot of peat restoration at the moment. And the techniques we used on Shapwick looks very dramatic from these pictures you can see here. So obviously all the trees have been cleared off. So the picture on the left is just after we'd finished this area. So it does sort of look like a bomb's hit it. We had big excavators in with mulchers on them to mulch all the trees and scrub down, sort of get a blank canvas, if you like. And then we use this technique that Steve mentioned called deep trench bunding, which seals up the subsurface sort of cracking that happens as peat dries out and degrades. So there was this area obviously was extracted for peat, so there's lots of ditches and drainage features sort of put in, and as well as the ditches themselves, the peat sort of structure itself breaks down, and that you get lots of cracks and peat pipes and things where water just disappears out of the site. So the deep trench bunds use peat itself in its sort of sticky good form to form these barriers all up through the peat column. So you can see the structure of the cells above the ground, but the main work of these bunds actually happens below the ground. So they go down 1.5 to 2 meters, some of these bunds, to block up that sort of subsurface degradation, which over time then raises the water table, which secures the carbon and also helps the habitat re-establish itself, the sphagnum mosses, all those sort of things, which I think is on my next pictures.
Yeah, I was going to say, so what do you think, what sort of the key indicators of change do you think you've seen since this work's taken place? Like if we look between these two images first and then we move on to your nice other ones, but you know, what's the key thing you sort of show from here?
Yeah, so I mean, the key things that we've looked at, which I know is sort of the same sort of monitoring you do on your projects, is the plant communities and also the water levels. So we've got dip wells in which monitor the water levels within the peat soil itself, but the sort of more which you know helps on the carbon and all that stuff, but it's a bit boring really. The exciting stuff is when you see these lovely plants coming back which have been lost there's some species that haven't been seen on the site for 20 years plus, which came back as soon as move on, get my photos up as soon as as soon as the water table came up, way quicker than I expected, to be honest with you. Some of these plants came back. So you've got at the top right oblong leaf sundew. So most people probably heard of sundews, but they're one of the carnivorous plants that we get in peatlands. So because peatlands raise, you know, bogs particularly are really low nutrients, some of these plants have evolved to eat insects instead. So sundew is one of those. We've got 3 species of sundew in the UK. Some of them do hybridize, so there's sort of more than 3, but anyway, there's 3. This is one of them, which we thought we'd lost. We thought we'd lost it. So it's amazing to see that come back. There's now hundreds of them across this plot, probably more than I've counted. And then we've also got, obviously, you know, the star of the show, the sphagnum moss in the photo below, which before restoration there was a few little clumps clinging on for dear life, and that's just absolutely exploded with the water table coming up. And again, on the left is a little plant called white beak sedge, which is another really key indicator species for raised bog habitats, which was, again, we thought we'd lost it and it's back. So lots of positive signs.
Yeah, it
so
looks
far.
really amazing. It looks really amazing. And yeah, I just wonder, and I mean, we'll move on to your other slide, but obviously here, again, you're showing lots more examples of sphagnum mosses. Have you done some translocations too to help like aid the process of bringing that colonization of the moss back into your site here?
Yeah, so we did translocate a bit of moss from another part of the site, but most of the sphagnum planting we did was actually from plugs that were propagated elsewhere, because as Steve mentioned earlier, the Somerset levels are pretty devoid of bogs as they should be. So we don't really have a local pool. Yeah, we don't have a local pool of sphagnum to draw on. It's generally best. I mean, if you can translocate from locally, then it saves money. You've got, you know, you haven't got that sort of biosecurity issue, all those sort of things. So it's preferable, but we just couldn't. We couldn't. So
you were able to sort of buy in the product from a company that produces it?
Indeed. Yeah. So there's a couple. On Shapwick, we used plugs from Cumbria Wildflowers, and on West Hay, another site, they've also used some plugs from Beader Moss. So there's not loads of places that do it, but there's a few places, and they're very good on all of the biosecurity, and they grow obviously in peat-free sort of condition, all this sort of stuff. So it's all very well documented and such.
And will you continue to monitor how that spreads and grows across the next sort of year since post?
We'll keep monitoring as long as we have resource to monitor.
It looks really positive. I think it's it looks amazing. Like in such a short time, that's all returned to your site. So given what you showed in the earlier slide with the really raw sort of brown kind of thing, but yeah, it's amazing. And do you think that the technique you used could be used anywhere, or it's quite specific to your habitat?
It's generally used on. It's been used mostly so far, so it's been used for about 30 years now, trialed and tested in various places. It's mostly been used on raised bogs, lowland raised bogs, so places that are relatively flat, you know, compared to, you know, proper slopey blanket bog peatlands and things like that. So you can use different bunds, sort of shapes and configurations of different situations, but this sort of cell shaped trench bunding is mostly sort of a raised bog type thing.
That's great. Well, I mean, yeah, thanks. It's been great hearing all about Shatwick from you. And so actually now we're going to switch across to the Dorset Heaths, in fact, and might have an example of a different shape bund to show you. So yeah, here we go. So yeah, as I was saying, this is a site called Canford Heath. This is one of the largest lowland heathland habitats in Dorset. Is about 384 hectares. It's slap bang in the middle. As you can see, it's an urbanized heath. This used to, obviously in the 60s, 70s, a lot of building works, land was built for housing. And this site in 22 suffered major fire damage, about 42 acres burnt across this triple SI habitat. About 20 people had to be evacuated from their homes. It's quite a big story across the news at the time. All this sort of proceeded, but at the same time, in this actual year, the Nature for Climate Peatland Grant Scheme, the Dorset Peat Partnership actually came together at this point. We got a discovery grant from the Nature for Climate Peatland Grant Scheme. And so with this grant, we started to investigate, what could we do here to maybe secure this site for the future from issues of climate change potentially, and also obviously, and how to better mitigate these fire incidents, which potentially this one was caused deliberately, but at the same time, it obviously clearly went up in smoke because a very dry habitat here. So yeah, so I wanted to share a little bit of story about here today with you.
Yeah, and did you find a lot of your sites had this similar issue of, because I know you've got a number of sites that are quite urban. Did you have a number of sites with the sort of wildfire issue?
Yeah, in fact, where I'm sitting today at my office is Mullin. We have Upton Heath just behind us, and again, that site had a big fire in April this year. So, yeah, unfortunately, they are sort of a magnet for people to go and obviously enjoy, but also to take advantage of. So, anyway, so I will slip across. So this next slide is kind of a bit of an example of some of the mitigation we've put in with our restoration funding, which happened this year. So this is showing you the site, and the little green like curves are what we've created contour bunds on site, and the blue lines represent areas where we're going to infill drainage ditches. So drainage ditches obviously clearly take water off the site, but by infilling them, we're going to secure water back on the site. So that's kind of some of the restoration processes that we've put in place. And here is, so here we had a huge drainage channel. So at the top of this mire, all the water would go down through this very dry, scrubby drain. You can't see it because it's all covered in bracken and Melinia. And at the top, so this is how it was back in 2024. You can still see the trees.
Grace, before you go on, can I just ask, obviously the site I was talking about is a lowland raised bog, which is one type of peatland, but what type of peatlands are we looking at here?
It's still classed as lowland heath habitat. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of dry heath habitat, but you can still see in this image, obviously, the coarse compines there, and you can still see all the burn mark evidence there from the fire in 22. So yeah, at the top of this, just from this is a really beautiful perched mire on top, but a lot of the water was leaving this site, going down this like long gully and out onto the sort of road, so causing a flooding problem as well. So so this site's actually owned and managed by Bournemouth Christchurch Pool Council. So they were quite keen that they wanted to do something here, obviously to support local residents as well as kind of improve the habitat against sort of climate change and problems.
And what did the local residents think of it? Was there sort of opposition, support?
This is a really interesting question. There was no opposition. We had nobody really complain. I think when we did get contractors mobilised to site, few people interrupted their dog walks, and they had decide to wear wellies, not trainers. But no, it's been all positive really, and I think
that's really good.
It's been here. So I will show you. So this is some of the works we did on this drain line in January this year. So kind of infilled that drainage channel, and we've started, the contractors started to put in some bunds with timber from the failed Corsican pines to kind of pull back and slow that water going through the site. So that's on the main drain. This is after the restoration work. So now we're like moving into a period of very hot weather. We all recall how warm it was this summer. What's really encouraging to note here is, again, now we're looking at the drain, and we're also looking at the perched mire on the left. And behind, you can see in the distance, you kind of got the urban conurbation of Poole.
So did you do work on the top as well as in the gully?
Yeah. So we did the work in the gully, and on the top, on that sort of top bit, which was a lovely perched bit of mire full of sphagnum mosses. But obviously this water was not really secure enough. So we've kind of put in some bunds, these horseshoe shaped bunds here, and you can see we've got some nice pooled water, and that's creating an amazing habitat for biodiversity, dragonflies, and it's keeping these sites wetter. Interestingly, they do graze animals here on the heath, so even the cattle were like finding that this was a nice adventurous place to come into in the very hot summer season this year. So we're starting to see quite a nice change here. We've flailed some of the Millennia tussocks because obviously that very dry heath vegetation kind of can help, in a fire scenario, that can go up quite quickly, burns if it's really, really dry. So that's also helped, and obviously infilling these channels with some of the timber that we've cut below as well.
And did you find that because of the previous wildfires, do you think that led to more support for this? Because obviously there's benefits from re-wetting it from that side as well as for biodiversity and carbon.
I think there's definitely help to kind of showing that obviously now these sites are re-wetted. If there were to be future fires, I think there'd be less damage to the habitat. And obviously this site is triple-sized, so it's not just the peat and the sphagnum mosses that can be damaged, it's also all those reptiles. Of course, in Dorset we have like 6 of the native reptiles, so there's lots of other ground nesting birds and things would have got lost in those previous incidents here. I'm gonna just show you the most recent image of this site. This was just taken a few weeks ago. So like Louise said, we like to try and monitor our sites. So I do have a little army of volunteers who go out now and do some fixed point photos for me. But again, you can see the site's kind of greened back up. It looks quite naturalized again, I think. And again, you're seeing evidence of this pooled water holding in the system and kind of keeping it re-wetted for longer. Which is encouraging.
Did you find through the drought this year that it stayed wetter?
Yeah.
How long did it totally dry out, or?
No, we saw that water, obviously May, we haven't got since May, but throughout we saw water still there across the summer. So I think that is quite a testament that some small interventions, blocking, timber damming, putting in some small sort of, natural flood management really helps to support these habitats and keep them super wet and boggy for longer. So
definitely
really noticing some good benefits, and hopefully we hope to get some more monitoring in the future on dragonflies and start recording what's occurring, because obviously we know biodiversity is struggling a lot in the current climatic conditions that we're seeing. So we've done these interventions on this particular site, and it was a wildfire site. We have also done some other interventions which I can share with people if we've got time to watch a short video.
Have we got time? How are we doing on time? No one's telling us to stop.
No, I'm here. How long is the video? Is it just a?
Oh, it's like 2 minutes, I think.
No, that's fine. Do
is
show.
That right? Yeah, so
like to see
this is an example from one of the National Trust sites on the Purbeck, Bodlingston Heath, and these works were done in January 24, and this video was taken in May 24, so shortly after works. But it gives you, explains some of the sort of methodologies of and techniques for holding up water in our wet mire habitats. And I'll just play. Ooh. No, it was actually even shorter than 2 minutes. Sorry, apologies.
Well, I think it's a great video. It really shows how much water you can hold back in these sites. Because I saw that site before it was restored, and there wasn't, you know, there is some nice bits of sort of sphagnum and things in there before, but there was nowhere near that amount of water being held back in the site. And I think it's one of the things, you know, obviously we're talking about climate change and things like that. Actually, we talk about the emissions from peatlands, but we haven't really mentioned the fact that actually with our changing climate and rainfall being more erratic, hotter summers, the more water we can hold in these systems, the more it helps the peatlands, as well as it helps us through, you know, reducing carbon emissions and things like that. So, and I think it's a win-win.
It is a win-win, and I think our next challenge is to really understand how much water we can store in these habitats, and there's some new WYSI GIS system that we're going to start looking at called Scalgo, because it might help us to sort of understand how much water is being stored in certain parts of these restored habitats, so we can sort of predict, like start to show what difference it's making as well. So I think that's quite important. But yeah, so thanks. It's been really nice to share with everyone stories from across Dorset and Somerset today. So hope it was interesting, and you know, do visit soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Louise. Great to see
Any
you.
questions? Just throw them our way.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you. I love the fact that you were sharing your different schemes to each other and hearing different perspectives. I enjoyed that. I think we all did. People have been saying so in chat. You'll be pleased to know. So moving on from Somerset and Dorset to my colleague Jenny, who's going to share a little bit about how we've been working with communities in relation to climate action and mosses in particular at times.
Hi everyone. So I'm Jenny. I'm part of the Art and Energy Collective along with Naomi and Chloe and Kat, and we specialise in community creative climate action. Now, 3 years ago when Naomi suggested that we look at mosses as our next theme, I didn't really get it, if I'm perfectly honest. And I certainly didn't get the link with peatlands. I didn't know anything about peatlands. And watching today just makes me realise how much personally, what the journey I've been on and we've been on as a team, but also bringing as many people on that journey with us as possible. I'm wondering whether I can invite you, please, to pop in the chat. When you say to somebody, I know I work on peatland restoration, or I'm interested in mosses, what sort of response do you get? And they're probably quite varied responses, but I'm just gonna ask you to pop something, a few comments in the chat about what do people think? Personally, I live in Plymouth and I love to get out into the mossy woods and up onto the mossy Dartmoor, but I had never looked closely at moss. So I sort of thought that all mosses were the same. I'm not somebody who holds names in my head very well at all. So we started off with beautiful guides, and I thoroughly recommend, if you've not already, then checking out this one in particular. Is a guide to mosses and liverworts of towns and gardens. And it is a Oh, who is it? Who produced this one? I can't remember. I can't see it right now. But I don't hang on very well to that at all. But for some people, that's a great way to access it, is by naming the mosses. Just having a look in the chat to see what we've got here about how people. Yeah, so we do. Nemi's put in there that people do tell us they love mosses. But looking closely at mosses, I've got a tiny bit of moss from my pavement outside my house today. So when we talk to people about mosses, quite often some people are just totally nonplussed, not interested at all. Other people see them as a nuisance. They're blocking the drain, they're making the path slippery, and they look at mosses very much in a immediate location around their homes. And I know we're here to talk about peatlands, but I think one thing we've found is if we can look in even closer and really hone in. So we've chosen largely to hone in on the mosses, then that helps people to focus in on a particular thing. For others, I've heard lots of stories of inaccessible locations when they're thinking about peatland locations, about wellies stuck in the mud, and about treks where they've drawn on a map, I'm going to walk from this place, this car park to this pub, and I'm going to walk in a straight line, and they attempt it, and they get stuck in the middle. We've heard lots about people saying peat-free compost, but they don't really know what peat is, to know what peat-free compost is, but they've heard about these campaigns. For others, they talk about how beautiful it is. We hear a lot about, for example, in Plymouth, a lot of people mention places like Wistman's Wood, and you talk to florists. My aunt was a florist, and she would get very excited visiting Dartmoor and coming to see the mosses, but then a sense of guilt about removing those mosses from their location. And we've met people over the last 3 years who, as children, or even in more recent years, have been involved in peat cutting and sphagnum collection. And then there's a particular conversation that I remember having with a lady up at Princetown after there'd been some peatland restoration, and she was very impassioned and frustrated and very angry about what she was saying, because she didn't understand what was happening. So she'd just seen all these big diggers come in, and to her mind that was destroying Dartmoor. So there's a real need, I think, to tell the story of what you guys, what the peatland restoration, what Louise and Grace and so, all the physical work on the ground, and the policy makers as well, a way of sharing that and making it more digestible with more people. So I mentioned about naming mosses and the looking closely. This is going to be a blatant pitch for Art and Energy's shop, but we really enjoy using these hand lenses to look closely, and they are for sale in the Art and Energy shop, but you can buy them elsewhere as well. So just slowing down, taking that time and inviting people to slow down with us and take the time to look at mosses has been a real lovely thing over the last 3 years to be able to do. So we've taken our Mossy Carpet project into all sorts of different settings, from schools to care homes to community cafes, religious settings, events, community events all over the place. And we've generally started by inviting people to look closely at moss, then to add to our mossy carpet, which Nemi shared the link in the chat earlier on about our mossy carpet project, to make a textile tuft to add to the artwork, and then to take the tardigrade telephone and to record a message on the telephone. Got our tardigrade here, about a small action that they are taking or are planning to take for the environment, for a better future. And I always find it really interesting listening back through to those, how many actually do relate to moss in a way. Either I'm going to use less weed killer in my garden, and I'm going to scrape the moss off my path rather than spraying, or I'm going to find out and I'm going to learn more about it. Especially in schools, children absolutely love. They are generally small beings who often feel totally powerless in terms of the world in which we live and the news that they hear. And when they look to mosses, tiny, easily overlooked plants, and they find out about the role that mosses play in the cracks in the pavement outside their house, and also on the moors and in the peatlands. And I'm going to apologise, because actually I found that really interesting watching Grace and Louise, your pictures then. how close some of the areas you work are to housing. And for me, I live in Plymouth, on the outskirts of Plymouth. I can see Dartmoor from my back windows, but it's sort of a reach away, and realizing how entwined we all are with that natural world. I think it's so important to invite people on that journey and to come along with us. So I wanted to mention a couple of examples to do with the community creative action. So there's a community cafe in the west of Plymouth, in an area called Barn Barton, which has significant difficulties. There's multiple levels of deprivation in that community, and this community cafe is run by volunteers, and they collect food from local shops and so on, and people arrive and queue up outside that door in all weathers to come and get their bag of goodies to then take home, and they're offered a cup of tea and a bacon sandwich or something like sandwich while they're there. And so for 4 Wednesdays earlier this year, I went along and took mosses into their space and had a small table in a corner. And the first couple of days that I was there, the first couple of Wednesdays, nobody came and spoke to me. And I went and sat with them and maybe had a chat and just edged into talking about moss, but they weren't, it wasn't really on their agenda for most of them. They were there to be able to get something to be able to put on the table for their family that evening. And then there was a lady called Liz who came along, who'd studied mosses at university, and she hadn't had the chance to talk to anybody about mosses before. And Liz coming and joining me, suddenly there were other people who knew Liz but didn't know she was interested in mosses, and they came and joined in. And by the 4th session, there were still some people who hadn't chosen to come and find out about moss. But by being able to take it into those communities and be able to offer that opportunity, some people did, and some people really enjoyed it. And then just down the road in Keam, there's a group called the Wellbeing Warriors. It's a group of young people, and they came, or Naomi and I went into their space, ran some workshops with them, talking about peatland restoration. And then we invited them up onto the moor at Harford, and they caught the train. They caught 2 trains from Keam to Plymouth, Plymouth to Ivybridge, and then came for a walk with us up onto the moor, and to experience the moor. For some of them, just that big open space, and then being invited to look at the mosses and to draw the mosses and to eat cake and to talk to people who knew and were passionate about that environment. And last week at the exhibition, we were joined by some of those young people. And I think it was probably 15 months ago now that we went up onto the moor, but for them it was so vivid. And again, one of them lost a trainer in the mud. I went and got it out. But the story behind it is so important for them, having that narrative. And then I wanted to mention a group in Nottingham. So we're down in Devon, but this lady had found out about the mossy carpet and the How to Bury the Giant project through social media. And so she ran a 6-week-long after-school club at her children's primary school called the Mossy Club. And on the very first week, they went out with maps of the school and a green pen. Where can you find moss? And draw it, colour it in green on the map. And they came back with barely any green at all. And then they did other activities. They had biologists visit them and bring in hand lenses and look closely at the moss and draw the moss and explore the moss. And I caught the train up there with a piece of the mossy carpet, and they added their textile to the mossy carpet. They recorded their messages on the tardigrade telephone. On the 6th week, they went back out into their school grounds with that map again, with plain new maps, and they found moss all over the place. And not only did they find moss, but they were able to talk about the moss. They were able to explain what the benefits were of those mosses to them, and to name some of those mosses and to feel part of that environment. And I just thought that was so exciting. So I think it's interesting in terms of the engagement side of things and why we should do it. And I think that thing of telling stories, offering multiple ways in. We hear loads about woodlands, don't we, and planting trees, but we don't hear a lot about mosses. And what we've heard time and time again today is about that funding and that need, the time that it takes, not only for the mosses to grow, but also for the projects to be developed and for the permissions to be sought and so on. And so the more we can bring lots of people along on that journey with us, the more likely we are to vote in, as a mass, to vote in ways that mean that we can secure funding. We've come across less barriers of planning permission with people objecting and not understanding, and the more people will place moss in the centre of their vision for the future and peatlands.
Thank you, Jenny. That was great to have a range of ways that we've been inviting people to engage, from the moss in between the paving stones outside their front door to the moor and the sphagnum and the peat and the role of peat and the connecting the urban with the rural and wild. It's great to hear that. Thanks. And so we've come to the end of the presentations, but has anyone got any particular questions for any of our presenters? You can ask. There's been one or two as we've gone along, which I can talk, but does anyone want to type in? Have we nearly sort of finished? There was a question, I think it was for Louise and Grace, about 3-year schemes, about the sort of funding cycle and whether there's shorter term or longer term options, whether there's an ideal, really, I suppose, in making maximum benefit for in the shortest time, but at the same time getting the funding. I don't know. What do you think about
nature conservation? It's got a chronic problem of chasing funding streams, and that is how it's always been. So we work with the timeframes we're given, I suppose. I mean, the Nature for Climate scheme has, in some ways, because we had the 2-year discovery phase first, that's sort of unheard of. So you got 2 years of money to actually develop projects, do the sort of pre-research, set things up, whereas a lot of the time funding comes out and you've got 1-2 years to deliver, and that's it. So this has been a longer time frame in some ways, but as with anything, more time and more funding is always needed. And I don't know, Grace, if you have any other reflections on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a gift to have a discovery grant in Dorset. So, we had like 12-18 months to collate. In fact, what we ended up delivering 16 sites across, obviously small scale sites, but they're all fragmented, but they're really important because we're kind of piecing up net patchwork of precious habitats, but obviously we've delivered all that by our sort of original grant, and obviously we've just done a 1-year extension, but now we're at that point, like, we could do more, but it's such a and we're gonna try, but it's like it just puts the pressure on, doesn't it, to kind of come up with a new list of sites and have it all ready and ready for winter next 26. But we're just trying to keep going if we can.
I agree. It's a constant pressure. Cisca mentioned the vowing and I suppose the commitment in a poetic sense, as well as there's a financial sense. So it's sort of bringing the heart to peatlands. And how do you think that? How do we sort of get the right balance, Cisca? Is there a way?
Yeah, thank you, Naomi. I definitely think there's a way. I think by recognizing that all impacts play a very specific role, and I think giving each of these impacts or each of these actions the real attention they deserve on the big stages at COP, but also in our day-to-day is when we find the balance and knowing we all play a part.
Yeah, I agree too. And with Steve's presentation and Garance's talking about sort of measuring, more precise science of measuring the carbon, counting the carbon element to it, that's a completely different way of assessing the benefits of all this work that we're doing, and it's a little bit mind-boggling. Is there any more you want to say about that, Steve, or is it just keep it mind-boggling, the scientists do it and we we understand the reduction, if you like. Are you? I can't see you on the screen at the moment.
Oh, I'm still here. Don't worry, Naomi. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I see we're pretty short on time, but I think. I mean, yeah, we can measure a lot more than we could 10, 15 years ago. And I think technology is going to become smarter and smarter and smarter about how we can track success on carbon. And also, I mean, already we have these things called dip wells for measuring water levels around the restoration sites that me and Lou work on. And, you know, we've already got that on an app. We've got that. We can now analyze, you know, in real time what the water levels are doing. And again, before it relied on a volunteer to go out there and measure it and write it down and report back, you know, which is not terribly fast. So technology is really, really helping in a lot of this.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. And last time, the last broadcast talked about a project called Eyes on the Bog with citizen science. And I think, so there are scientists assessing, and then there's opportunities for communities to get involved, take photographs, do some of the surveying, become volunteers. And then there's all of us signing up to the Venice Agreement, as Cisca was describing, in terms of our sharing our hearts with peatlands. So I think on that note, we have done come to the end of the broadcast. I've learnt a massive amount, and I'm in awe of all of you guys that work in the restoration of the peatlands and get to really understand that. And thank you everybody else for coming along and taking part and chatting in the chat as well, sharing your experience. So thank you, and we'll say goodbye. Bye.